Bond thinks he's turning Japanese. Bond thinks he's turning Japanese. He really thinks so. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Really?
Well, it's better than saying YOLO.
And to believe that I'm your clone.
You Only Live Twice, released in 1964 as a novel, finds Bond moping around London following the events of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, in which, of course, his wife Tracy is killed by Blofeld, and crap, I just spoiled next week's episode, forget I said that. Anyways, Emma recruits him to, perhaps, up his vigor and regain the old Bond by sending him to Japan with a next to impossible mission of receiving or procuring Russian communications from Tiger Tanaka, the head of the Japanese Secret Service. Meanwhile, the 1967 film, scripted by Roald Dahl, and directed by Lewis Gilbert, finds Bond in Hong Kong, who, well, fakes his death, is buried at sea, and is picked up by M to be briefed on his mission in an MI6 office in a submarine. What's the mission? Oh, it's nothing too hard. Just prevent World War III by going to Japan, connecting with some MI6 and Japanese Secret Service contacts there, and, finding some missing space capsules. In both versions, Bond connects with Henderson, MI6's contact in Japan. In the novel, he's described as kind of a raunchy, drinking, womanizing Australian who serves as Bond's cover, but that cover is discarded not too far into the novel. In the film, however, he's British, played by Charles Gray, has been living in Japan for about 28 years, has a lot of purple accent that ends around his pad. Purple, the accent. Is he gay? Never mind that. Anyways, Bond proceeds to connect with Tanaka. In the novel, Tanaka recruits Bond to investigate one Dr. Shatterhand, the proprietor of a Gardner Castle of Death. This, Dr. Shatterhand, proves to be the elusive Kaiser Soze, Ernst Stavro Blofeld of Spectre. In the film, however, you get to see Bond and Tanaka, two men of different nations, working together to, stop World War III by finding the missing space capsules, and in the long run, preventing China from becoming a major player in the world in the event that the US and Russia end up going to war. Bond infiltrates both the Castle of Death as well as Blofeld's dormant volcano lair thanks to the help of Tiger Tanaka and Casey Suzuki, Bond's cover wife. In both versions, of course, he follows the plans, defeats Blofeld, and escapes, blowing up both locations. But in the novel, he suffers amnesic matrimony with Kissy, and in the film, he suffers, doesn't really suffer, really, end-of-film woman time. That goes without saying. This is the start of the novel-film divergence of the Bond series. Previously, the adaptations were more or less pretty faithful, with a few changes here and there, either for continuity's sake or to add a little more action or to smooth things out a little bit. But for this film, Dahl scrapped most of the original novel, kept the main characters, the antagonist, the locale, among other things. But we'll get into this divergence in the coming weeks. To bring a bit of political relevance back into the series, the late 60s allow for a continuation of the space race that was previously alluded to in Dr. No, as well as more of a Cold War feel that the previous films didn't quite have. The novel, however, deals more with culture, specifically Japanese culture and the perceptions of it by other cultures. You get more of a tour of Japan in the novel as Bond and Tanaka make their way to the Gardner Castle of Death. You also get more discussion of the suicide culture of Japan, like seppuku, and committing suicide to regain one's honor, among other things, which is kind of what inspired Blofeld to come up with the whole castle or garden of death idea. And you also get the Japanese perception of other nations, like, the British Isles. Tanaka and other higher-up government officials in Japan feel that, Britain pretty much discarded its culture and its empire right after the war, and that really doesn't reflect too well on the nation. There are two different views of the so-called second life that Bond leads. The film presents his second life from his assassination, faked assassination, mind you, onwards, which is so real that Blofeld basically doesn't believe it, and Bond tells him, this is my second life. There's also the disguising of Bond, disguising of his identity, kind of a second life, if you will. That's in both versions, of course. And the novel presents his second life as an amnesic Japanese shell diver who doesn't remember that he's James Bond. Continue on the duality of lives, you have the duality of people, namely Tanaka, Kissy, and Blofeld. Tanaka, of course, is Japanese born, bred, and raised, but Oxford educated. Kissy, a one-time Hollywood actress who returned to being an Alma shell diver, did so because she didn't like the animalistic and body-obsessed world of Hollywood, if you will, and Blofeld has his identity of Shatterhand.
As for Hollywood, the novels are more aware of popular culture than the films are. For example, Casey Suzuki. She's described as a Japanese Greta Garbo. Looks nothing like a Japanese Greta Garbo. Her diving cormorant, David, is named after David Niven, a British actor best known for his role in the original Pink Panther film, and among other things, the Casino Royale parody. But the films tend to lack this general awareness of popular culture, unless, of course, you consider the artists chosen to sing the theme songs for each movie.
Diving into the little highlighted category of gadgets, well, the film takes things in a more outlandish nature. You have Little Nellie, the miniature helicopter loaded with weapons that defends her honor with great success. You also have the gadgets provided by Tanaka and the ninjas, like a rocket-propelled bullet and explosive little cigarette dart things, which aren't really in the film at all. All those things. Not in the film, as Bond goes into the mission pretty much with his bare hands, minimal weapons, like ninjas.
There's a sexuality issue, of course. Philip Henderson is presented with an airy British accent, claims to get things other than vodka from the doorman at the Russian embassy, and has a lot of purple accented pillows and lamps around his pad, and he's knifed in the back to contain his perhaps homosexual threat to Bond. Then there's the catchphrase, or the code phrase of, "I love you," which does present awkwardness for Bond and Tanaka, because why would one grown man confess his love for another grown man? But really, Bond doesn't do too much policing of gender, sexuality, or identity boundaries in this franchise entry.
As for the womenfolk and their attitude towards them, well, Bond's womanizing is kind of the butt of jokes. The two soldiers who find Bond's fake death say, oh, well, he would have wanted to die this way. In bed with a foreign woman, it's implied.
As Bond is seducing Miss Brandt, the secretary of Mr. Osato, the head of Osato Chemicals, he says almost tongue-in-cheek, "Oh, the things I do for England," when he doesn't even remember what happened with the Spectre agent from the previous film Thunderball. Really? But Brandt receives a dip in the piranha tank courtesy of Blofeld.
After Bond escapes the crashing plane abandoned by Brandt, Tanaka tells him, "Chasing women will be the end of you, Bond-san."
As for the rest of the Bond women, Aki, his first Japanese contact, is poisoned, perhaps for sharing a bedroll with Bond. And Kissy, well, her wardrobe isn't exactly situation appropriate. She wears a bikini when they first go to investigate the volcano, or the dormant volcano, and then she wears a short robe, and then back to a bikini, so none of the ninja-appropriate garb for the invasion.
And to quickly wrap things up, Bond is more of a subtle symbol in this film, as, of course, he undergoes surgery to look more like a Japanese native, and as his mission overall is of worldly concern, not just Great Britain's concern.
You Only Live Twice injects a bit of fun and improves upon the odd pacing of the Fleming novel, and begins the sensationalization of the spy genre, thanks to, among other things, an aerial stunt fight scene and a ninja attack. Next week, Bond gets married. Wait, seriously?
Hey, don't look at me. I didn't write the novels, and I didn't choose to read them out of order.